From Chicago studios, this is Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. First, the headlines. New COVID variant locks down largest Chinese city as U.S. authorizes second booster. Israel PM says it has a wave of murderous Arab terrorism. Bahrain shuts down Indian restaurant for anti-hijab bias. Bangladesh shuts largest school in Rohingya camps. Biden signs law finally making lynching a hate crime. Our top story tonight. China's largest city, Shanghai, home to 28 million people and a major manufacturing hub, is in its third day of lockdown due to the latest COVID variant. Meanwhile, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has authorized a second booster of the Pfizer-BioNTech or Moderna coronavirus vaccines for older people. On Tuesday, the agency said the second booster dose may be administered to people 50 and older at least 4 months after the first booster of any approved COVID vaccine. A CDC survey says an estimated 95% of Americans ages 16 and older have developed identifiable COVID antibodies, which might prevent another major wave of infection. On Tuesday, a Palestinian who opened fire, killing 5 Israelis, was shot dead near Tel Aviv. The attack brought the number of people killed in the past 2 weeks to 11, making it one of the deadliest periods in Israel in several years. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett warned of a wave of murderous Arab terrorism. His counterpart, Mahmoud Abbas, president of the Palestinian Authority, condemned the attacks, denouncing the killing of Palestinian and Israeli civilians. Israeli soldiers raided several Arab cities in northern Israel to arrest suspected Palestinian fighters. The attack came days after Israeli security forces conducted several raids on the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Authorities in Bahrain's capital Manama shut down an Indian restaurant after it denied entry to a woman wearing the hijab. Video footage of restaurant staff barring a veiled woman from the restaurant in the Muslim-majority country went viral on social media, causing outrage. On Friday, the friend of the woman in question explained what happened in a now widely shared video. In it, the woman said the restaurant, Lanterns, told her friend she cannot enter because she was wearing a hijab. Bahraini newspaper The Daily Tribune reports that the Bahrain Tourism and Exhibition Authority has launched an investigation into the matter. The Indian state of Karnataka has banned hijab-wearing girls in schools, and now an Indian university is investigating a Muslim student offering his prayers at the campus. On Monday, officials said Bangladesh has shut the largest private school for Rohingya refugees. Since December, Bangladeshi authorities have been shutting down schools set up by the Rohingya and late last week closed Gayapudi School. The school was set up by Mohib-ullah, a prominent Rohingya community leader, allegedly gunned down in September by a Rohingya militant group. The move comes as an added blow to the educational prospects of thousands of children stuck in vast camps in the country's southeast. Bangladesh, as a policy, does not allow Rohingya children to study beyond 3rd grade. Bangladesh has been sheltering about 1 million Rohingya refugees from neighboring Burma since the genocide of Rohingyas in 2017. On Monday, the Tunisian Human Rights League condemned military trials being held for civilians. Anadolu News Agency reports that the group called for the acceleration of revising relevant laws, including the terrorism law. That legislation has resulted in journalists being prosecuted with impunity, as well as restrictions on human rights activists and the activities of civil associations. The League called on the country's supreme authority to involve national forces in forming public policies and include it in future dialogue. Tunisia has been in a political crisis since July 25, 2021. That was when President Kais Saied froze the parliament, issued legislation by presidential decree, and dismissed the cabinet and appointed a new one. A member of the Karnataka Legislative Council in India called the banning of Muslims from conducting business on temple grounds illogical. Senior leader of India's ruling BJP party, H. Vishwanath, said the government should break its silence and take action against temple authorities. He said the state of Karnataka is moving in the wrong direction, hurting the livelihood of Muslims who sell flowers, fruits, and worship material near temples. Vishwanath said the practice amounts to untouchability and urged that the government should think beyond party, caste, and religion. On Tuesday, U.S. President Joe Biden signed into law legislation finally making lynchings a federal hate crime. It ends more than a century of delays in outlawing the symbol of what Biden called pure terror. Anyone convicted under the new law will face up to 30 years in prison. Researchers say there were thousands of lynchings that often went unpunished between the end of the Civil War in 1865 and 1950. The new law is named after Emmett Till, a 14-year-old African-American whose brutal murder galvanized the U.S. civil rights movement in the 1950s. Tuesday's signing was also attended by Vice President Kamala Harris, the first black woman in the post, and Michelle Duster, great-granddaughter of pioneering black journalist and anti-lynching campaigner Ida B. Wells. Leaders of the United States, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy on Tuesday urged the West not to drop its guard against Russia. Moscow signaled it would scale down fighting around the Ukrainian capital Kyiv and another city.
Had a meeting with the heads of state of our four allies in NATO, France, Germany, the United States, and Great Britain. And there seems to be a consensus that let's just see what they have to offer.
The White House said the five leaders agreed to not let up on strong economic sanctions imposed on Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine. They affirmed their determination to continue raising costs on Russia for its brutal attacks in Ukraine, as well as to continue supplying Ukraine with security assistance to defend itself. Training programs for 4 conventional banks on Islamic banking and finance have been conducted in Uzbekistan. The programs were developed by the Islamic Development Bank Institute and the Islamic Corporation for the Development of the Private Sector. The 5-day training for each bank included the subjects of principles of Islamic finance, Islamic financial contracts, and introduction to Sharia standards. According to the UK-based business financing platform Qardus, Islamic banking accounts for over 6% of the global banking market. Islamic banking makes up over 68% of the total market of the global Islamic financial services industry. The United Nations Development Programme and Islamic Relief Worldwide have announced a $22 million partnership to support Afghanistan's economy. The project will boost food production, inject cash into the local economy, and support female entrepreneurs in some of Afghanistan's poorest areas. It will employ communities to rehabilitate almost 200 agricultural irrigation systems by year-end, providing over 158,000 families with cash for food and other essentials. The partnership will also work to stimulate local markets and improve long-term farming productivity. We're bringing more news stories after the break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. Brothers and sisters, we all watch the Allahu Akbar lady from India. She's amazing, isn't she? She's neither compromising her hijab nor her education. She's standing tall. We must stand with her. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect her. But it is not just hijab, brothers and sisters. Indian Muslims are facing genocide.
Genocide that we face in India is not a new phenomenon. India has had several genocides.
They are attacked every day. Even the Indian government admits there has been more than 1,800 organized attacks on Muslims, but they call it riot. 660 people are hanged to death in India, lynched in broad daylight, sometimes just because they were accused of eating beef. Yes, accusation of eating beef can kill a human being in India. We cannot remain silent, can we? Alhamdulillah, OIC has spoken, that is good, but why in the world United Nations is silent? The UN has a responsibility to protect. It has a duty to prevent genocide. Sisters and brothers, we must stand with Indian Muslims and other minorities. We are free, they are not. We are not attacked, they are under attack day and night. Let's do our job. I have signed this UN petition. I ask you to sign it now. Thank you so much.
Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban, or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime? And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
On Tuesday, U.S. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez joined a chorus of Democratic voices demanding that U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas resign. Ocasio-Cortez's comments come in the wake of new revelations that Thomas's wife, right-wing activist Ginny Thomas, pushed a Trump administration official to try to overturn the 2020 election. This while Justice Thomas is hearing cases related to elections. The New York Democrat said if Thomas does not step down, his conduct could serve as grounds for impeachment. The Washington Post reports that Ginny Thomas exchanged more than 24 text messages with former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows after the election. She urged him to help this great president stand firm, while former President Donald Trump was claiming the election results were fraudulent. Internal White House documents show a gap in former President Donald Trump's call logs from January 6, 2021. That has raised suspicions that Trump allies are illegally hiding his phone records from a House panel investigating the January 6 Capitol attack. On Tuesday, the Washington Post's Bob Woodward and CBS News' Robert Costa reported on the 457-minute gap in the official White House call logs. There is no record of Trump's phone conversations as his supporters descended on the Capitol, overwhelming police and forcibly entering the building, they reported. The 11 pages of records comprising the president's official daily diary and the White House switchboard call logs were turned over by the National Archives earlier this year. In Canada, Ontario's New Democratic Party, or NDP, removed a longtime legislator from caucus because he had joined an Islamophobic Facebook group, officials said. On Wednesday, the party's provincial director gave details about Paul Miller's ouster, announced last week with few specifics about what prompted it. Lucy Watson said the party's vetting process ahead of the June election discovered Miller was a member of the Worldwide Coalition Against Islam Facebook group. Watson said the finding came after a pattern of troubling behavior indicating Miller may harbor Islamophobic, homophobic, and racist views. Miller's membership in the Facebook group and his pattern of behavior crossed any reasonable lines, she said. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. because this may be the last time I'll have lunch.
Till September.
I am a single father of two who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. To discuss the findings of Amnesty International's annual report, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Samana. Amnesty International continues to issue its annual reports, and their annual reports are not kind to many people. But at this time, there quite a bit of focus is on governments and billionaires who are exploiting people during the COVID. But they have also comments on different parts of the world. To discuss with us is Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa, Shenilla Mohamed. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam and assalamu alaikum to your viewers.
Welcome to Muslim Network TV. Tell us how political leaders and corporates are profiting from COVID.
Well, our State of the World Report 2021 has not been very kind towards political leaders and towards corporates, because what we found is that there was a major collusion between these two groups, particularly around the issue of COVID vaccines. I mean, what we found was that profits were more important than people's lives, that some lives were more important than others. We saw the way in which richer countries started to stockpile vaccines instead of sending all vaccines to to all countries around the world. And even in a crisis, we were unable as humanity to come together. So let me give you one example. By the end of 2021, only 8% of Africans on the continent were actually vaccinated. That pharmaceutical companies who were boasting that they would make around $54 billion by the end of 2021 through their COVID vaccines, only 2% of those vaccines went to poorer countries of the world, including South Asia, including other poor regions in the world, where the rich countries were stockpiling. Their people were getting 2-3 jabs, including the booster. Most people in Africa and in South Asia and other poor countries were not getting the vaccinations that they needed. And of course, this had a knock-on effect, which we can discuss, later.
Why in the world institutions like World Health Organization and United Nations, which were created with a whole lot of hope, and why they fail in this area?
Well, look, the United Nations and the World Health Organization tried. They set up the COVAX facility, which was really about, trying to put out an equal distribution of vaccines around the world. But, the problem was that nationalism kicked in. And what we're seeing is like a new world order where nationalism really, takes over. And most countries are only looking inwards. But, the saddest thing about it all was that, countries don't realize that, they can vaccinate vaccinate their people all they like. But unless the whole world is given the weapons they need to be able to fight pandemics like COVID, nobody's actually safe, because the mutants and the variants and all of that will continue to flourish. And so, yes, the institutions failed, the governments failed, and I think, what we saw in 2021 was actually really poor global leadership. The global leaders of the world actually failed the world, and we did not get the leadership that we wanted around the world in order for us to really come through this pandemic in a way that was not devastating. And, the impacts of this really selfish behavior by pharmaceuticals and by leaders really had a devastating impact. For example, in Africa, if I'm to tell you that 8% of the population was vaccinated by the end of 2021, well, what does that mean in real terms? It means that schools were unable to open. It means that healthcare facilities that were already overburdened were even more overburdened as they were dealing with cases of COVID and people dying. And, it just meant that all infrastructure was really cracking under the added burden of COVID. So, we saw major crises taking place during 2021.
Do you think that nationalism, which you say gave rise during pandemic, while pandemic required international cooperation and connection, is that just a temporary change, or you see nationalism will continue to build and disrupt international cooperation, especially between the corporations and individuals in countries where they are not based?
Nationalism was not a new thing. I think COVID just exacerbated it. I mean, even before COVID, we saw the rise of right-wing nationalism. We saw it in India. We saw it in America. We saw it in other parts of the world. And I think that, it really, what we saw in COVID, during COVID, was actually an outcome of that nationalism that was taking hold around the world. And, I think, the saddest thing about that form of nationalism is that what it does, it gives rise to even further inequalities. It sends out a strong message that our people are more important than everybody else in the world. I mean, we see today playing out in Ukraine. I mean, one of the things that our report talks about is that, Ukraine has showed us that when governments want to do something about refugees and asylum seekers and those running away from conflict or from poverty, they can do something. I mean, we saw how they all came to the table, the rich countries around Ukraine, and it was the people that looked like them that mattered to them, not the people from Syria or other countries. And in fact, one of the things we document in our report is that when Syrian refugees actually got to Denmark, the Danish government told them to hand over all their valuables so that they would sell those valuables and use those in order to sustain them while they stayed in their country. They didn't do that with the Ukrainians, and actually under international law they're supposed to provide protection. So again, this thing about some lives are more important than others really has started, to show up quite starkly in the world. And unless we do something about it, the world is going to continue to be unequal, and we are going to continue to see people dying and conflict around the world.
You mentioned India along with the nationalism. Amnesty International was forced out of India, but you continue to have an opinion. How are you collecting your facts from India?
Well, Amnesty International is a global movement of 10 million people. And, even though, we have had huge problems in India and, the government there has tried its utmost to shut us down and to, stop us from doing what we're doing, we will never stop. I mean, we have our ways of gathering evidence. Even now in Ukraine, we have people on the ground gathering evidence. We have crisis teams on the ground. We still have have members in India, even though we may not have an office. And I think that, that these governments may try, very hard, but they're not going to stop organizations like ours from really gathering the evidence that we need in order to, firstly, hold a mirror to what's happening in the world, and secondly, to hold people to account. Our people are in Ukraine at the moment gathering evidence, and, not just India. I mean, we had to close our office recently in Hong Kong. We had to close down the national office. We had to close down the regional office, but that's not going to ever stop us from talking about what China is doing. So, again, during Ukraine, we had to move our people out of Moscow, out of Russia. Many of our people had to be moved out of Ukraine, but that will never stop us from talking about what's going wrong there. So again, I feel like one of the things that organizations like ours and the media, the media also, we saw that the media during 2021 was really not safe. During our analysis, we saw that 1/3 of countries around the world actually introduced a new legislation in order to block the media and to, make the media stop doing what they're supposed to be doing. So all of us are under threat, not just organizations like Amnesty, but media, other, civil society organizations. And I think it's really important that we don't allow ourselves to be bullied and pushed into a corner and be muzzled. That's what states want. They want us to shut up. And I think that that's never going to happen with Amnesty International.
Thanks to your membership, right? That's
absolutely
a good instrument to have. So India shut down your offices, but you used to have members who probably continue to communicate, and hopefully they will not be traced and harassed and murdered, because, Reporters Without Borders came up with the report that India media freedom ranking is 142nd, which is below Burma and Afghanistan. I was shocked to see that type of situation. So what is the situation of human rights in India now?
Well, again, in India, I feel like, India, like other parts of the world, there's a nationalism. There are a lot of blasphemy laws. There's a lot of harassment of civil society organizations like ours. There are trumped up charges. Amnesty staff had to face trumped up charges, and the human rights violations are really quite quite severe in India. But it's the same in Afghanistan, Pakistan as well. We've seen, lots of human rights violations, particularly around women. Gender-based violence is on the increase. Blasphemy laws are there, and people are being persecuted for their beliefs. So it's really across the board where rights are being violated by states. And I think, one of the only hope or the bright light that came out during 2021 was the fact that people were determined not to allow these states to cower them and to shut them up. And so we saw a rise in people power. We saw people taking to the streets. We saw women taking to the streets, and I think that is what's going to save us in the long run, is that, when people decide that they are not going to be, put into a corner or shut up by their states, and they're going to hold them to account. So really, it was a bad year for human rights across the board in all countries. And, Afghanistan, for example, we saw 300 media houses shut down in 2021. So, it has not been a good year for media as well.
So, Shenilla, Amnesty also says that Russia is doing in Ukraine what they did in Syria. Could you shed some light? What are the common features there?
Well, Amnesty International basically has said that, what Russia has done in Ukraine actually could amount to war crimes. The evidence we've gathered is, we've seen that they've been using cluster bombs. We've seen, that this is actually an act of aggression. Amnesty has defined it as an act of aggression, which is against international law. And we've also noted in our evidence gathering that, the use of certain arms and ammunition is also against international law. So, for example, international law states quite clearly that cluster bombs should not be used in spaces where there are civilians. And this has been used indiscriminately by Russia, causing huge amount of damage and killings of civilians. So again, we are a legal organization. We look at what is happening in the rights violation space against, international human rights law and the laws of those countries. And, from what we're seeing, from where we are sitting, Russia most probably has violated international law. And we are now calling on the International Criminal Court to actually investigate Russia and to declare whether what Russia has done there is crimes against humanity and to take the action required against Russia. So for us, what Russia has done is an act of aggression. An act of aggression is in violation of international law.
Thank you so much, Shenilla Mohamed, for your time, Executive Director of Amnesty International, based in South Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to you, Samana.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.